Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
And a good morning to you. I think I was afraid I was going to sound more nasally. Can you imagine more nasally? Yeah, because I feel very stuffed up. Anyway, I never quite know what it's going to sound like. I try not to talk to myself too much, but it's what we do when we're alone. And apparently, I read somewhere that it's good to talk to yourself if you're alone. I'm not sure why, and I can't remember what the hell it said and what the reason was, but it stuck with me. So, whatever. I also get a kick out of people who talk to themselves when they're not alone. You know what I mean? My mother, for instance, her whole life would always be heard talking to herself, when you were sitting right there, which I find particularly strange, but charming at this. I guess charming, yeah, right. Whatever. God, I'm looking out my window. It just looks like a beautiful day. I know it's going to be hot as hell, but just beautiful. It's August late 29. August 29th. I was thinking, it used to be that you always thought that the political season begins on Labor Day, which is coming up, and it starts on Labor Day because that's when things, all the stops get pulled out because that's September. So you got September, you got October, and then you got November, the election. And so we're getting close, and whatever anybody's got, best be shown soon. And hope is growing among Democrats that disaster can be avoided. I don't know. Everything I refuse to jump on this. We're going to hold a house bandwagon. It apparently is possible, but it is not, from what the people who crunch numbers say, probable. There is a narrow path that can be seen where the Democrats could hold the House. God, I hope. The thing is, and I forget where I read it, but heaven knows I've noted it myself, that in American politics, you can pretty much break things down to before Trump and after Trump, because it's become quite clear that what has always been the popular wisdom of what happens in American politics is no longer necessarily true. One cannot count on the norm anymore because Trump exploded norms. And so even this norm that the party holding executive power, whoever's sitting in the White House, that party suffers during the midterm election. And with Biden's popularity so low and inflation so high and all of that, the assumption has been that the Democrats are going to get killed in November. But it's not looking like that as much. And it's because of, I have to say, my sense is that the greatest gift that the Democrats have is the Republican Party and Donald Trump. Because quite clearly, if anything is lifting Democrats' chances, it is the Republican Party. Donald Trump, his and their Supreme Court. If the Dobbs decision is the force it appears to be, an awful lot of people are coming out propelled by that decision. So you have this exceedingly conservative, much more conservative than the country itself, Supreme Court, coming down with this exceedingly unpopular and cruel decision. It's obviously so unpopular that Republican candidates, even House candidates, are starting to back away, even as state legislatures controlled by Republicans go full steam ahead at criminalizing abortion. So you've got a Republican Party that is being really run by its most extreme elements. And anytime a party goes to its extreme, and anytime the extremists in a party appear to be in control of a party, Americans recoil. They do when Democrats get too lefty, and they do when Republicans get too righty. So I'm thinking that the greatest gift, as I said, the Democrats have Donald Trump, the Supreme Court. And all the crazies. Doug Mastriano. All the crazies. I think Americans have pretty much had it. Most. There is no doubt that the crazies do not constitute the majority of Americans. So the only thing for the majority to do is to show up at the polls and vote for Democrats. And if the majority does, we would hold the House. We would increase our standing in the Senate. So we will see. Part of the most, the thing that is driving the Republican Party off the rails and has driven it off the rails, let me get the tense right, and is driving America into this frightening place is the spread, the easy spread of disinformation, misinformation, flat out lies that are then repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated ad nauseum, swallowed whole by tens of millions of Americans, the vast majority of the Republican Party, and who knows, as much as 40% of the American population. And it becomes clear that even if reputable news operations clearly debunk this crap, it doesn't move the needle. So the spread of disinformation is, to me, the thing that has to somehow be gotten under control. There are reporters now whose sole beat is disinformation, misinformation. They watch it. They know where it's coming from. They see the trends. They see who is pushing it. And to listen to these reporters, it becomes very, very daunting to imagine that we could ever get a handle on it. One of the things that those who watch have noticed is that in the last election, well, certainly in the election in 2016, it was foreign actors. When I wanted to be an actress, I always took exception to that word actor being used to represent a person of, criminal intent. But that's what the cops use, actor. It was foreign actors, Russia mostly, but China as well, Iran, others, that created, fake accounts, bot accounts, and took to social media and did a job promoting Donald Trump. And they were successful. But those who watch where disinformation is coming from now say the foreign actors, they're still at it, but nowhere near as much as domestic. It's sort of like, remember the terrorists we used to be so afraid of were those foreigners? And now the terrorists we're afraid of are our neighbors. So the threat is not foreign. The threat is domestic. And I was reading a back and forth conversation by these reporters, all of whom this is their beat. This is what they know. And what they're struck by is how many organizations exist now in this country with the sole mission of spreading lies. As one of them says, it's the lies spread. It's not just family members sharing fake news on Facebook anymore. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of money sloshing around. There are lots of deep-pocketed, well-organized groups that take issues like voter fraud, the raid on Mar-a-Lago, and they spin those things into, of course, conspiracy theories, lies, and you know what? They make lots of money, as well as achieve a certain political result, perhaps. And to talk to these reporters, you find out that this is a very organized machine at this point. And it's very different from 2016 and the disinformation we saw then, even 2020 and the disinformation we saw then. It's not just some fleeting interest spurred by a few partisans. It is an entire community and social network and pastime and money maker for millions of people, according to one of these reporters. And they say that actually, Facebook and the others did get finally a handle on some of the foreign actors, but getting a handle on domestic becomes a lot more difficult. One of these reporters noted that it was literally minutes after the horror in Uvalde that these actors were already online, had already created a ton of totally false narratives about what was happening, about what happened, and it just mutated into dozens of copycat accounts, accounts pretending to belong to the gunman. I'm sure if you recall, you remember all sorts of stuff initially coming out that was total fantasy, the imagination of some son of a bitch who finds this fun. So I don't know what to tell you, but it ain't going to stop. The last thing that one of these reporters said is the most reasonable thing we can hope for is that social media companies, excuse me, start being more serious about this and continue to refine whatever weapons they have to ameliorate the amount of false information that is out there. But it sounds like they're not holding their breath. So I was really thinking a lot about this. And then lo and behold, obituary of the day. This popped up just this morning. And I thought, wow. The guy named Rick Reed. I know, I never heard of him either. But I saw what he did. And I saw the impact of what he did. And you'll recall it too. Rick Reed was the Republican operative, an advertising guru, who came up with those ads that a lot of people think finished off John Kerry in his presidential bid and put George W. Bush in the White House. The swift boating ads, remember those? You see, Kerry was a Vietnam War veteran who had won medals, who had served, and then who famously came back, this young veteran, and appeared before congressional committees denouncing the war. In so doing, he became immediately somebody the Democratic Party was looking at with great interest. But he also became somebody that the hawks of the Vietnam War loathed. And so there were a bunch of Vietnam vets who also had been on swift boats, and they got together and they got this guy. And, well, the rest. And here's the thing. I remember being stunned by it. I don't know if you do. Because if there was one thing that you didn't, I'm sorry, the guy served. The guy served honorably. The military awarded him, a medal saying he served honorably. How can you possibly take that away, turn it around, and make it some negative? I mean, even John McCain, was appalled. He called those ads dishonest and dishonorable, which of course they were. They were lies. And yet, they worked. And I'm looking at this obit and I'm thinking, see, so that's 2004. When we talk about when did the Republicans start doing this crap? Well, here, 2004, total lies. And so powerful that, in fact, it created a verb, right? Swift-boated. He was swift boated, which is, and the definition of that term is the making of an ad hominem attack, typically untrue. Swift boated. So, of course, it was a Republican. Lying seems to be something that they really, really, really love to use and weaponize, and have been doing it forever. I want to point out, by the way, looking at this guy's bio, that before he did the swift boating ads, guess where he, learned how to be a good Republican? First of all, he did advance work in Florida for Ronald Reagan in 1976. This was not a successful run for Reagan in Florida. And then he went to work for a consulting firm. And guess who led that Republican consulting firm? I think you're going to hear two names you know. Paul Manafort and Roger Stone. So look at the little thread here. 2004, Swift Boat ad. And the guy who produced that babe, fooled by Paul Manafort, who would later go on to run Donald Trump's campaign, and Roger Stone. Both of whom were pardoned by Donald Trump. So there, I just, this is not a new phenomenon. But boy, with Trump, it's just gone whole hog. Whole hog. I happened to see a YouTube video last night that somebody had suggested I watch, and it really was fascinating. And it was the guy who had, in fact, written Trump's so-called autobiography, The Art of the Deal. This guy's name is Tony Schwartz. And Tony Schwartz, a few months before Trump was elected president, he spoke at Oxford University. And the title of his speech was The Truth About Trump. And it is the most eviscerating takedown of a human being that you can hear. And Tony Schwartz did it because at the time he was terrified that Donald Trump could be elected president. In the speech, he quite clearly thinks it ain't going to happen. Oh, dear. Because he said it would put not only our country in danger, it would put the world in danger. And he so clearly nailed everything that Trump, in fact, turned out to be as president. Because he spent so much time with Trump. He saw the man. He saw that he was, I think he says, characterologically, absolutely the most vile human being he had ever met. I mean, this guy's guilt about this is palpable. Because he helped sell him. he said, I created in the book a much more charming, engaged human being than the actual one, who was not charming, who was not engaged, who he noted had the attention span of a kumquat, and that all he ever wanted is more. You know how he met him? He had done a piece. He was a reporter. He had done a piece about a 38-year-old Donald Trump, then a up-and-coming real estate mogul in Manhattan, who had just purchased some major piece of real estate that was filled with people living in apartments in Manhattan, and it was rent controlled, which means Trump wasn't going to make money he wanted from it. So he actually had hired a firm to drive those residents out. I mean, literally to drive. There was a firm he hired to drive them out by doing things like making sure the elevators never worked, so you had to walk up 15 floors, or making sure the air conditioning didn't work, or the heating went down, or lights went out, or this and that, and to create a situation in which the people just threw up their hands and left. And this guy, Schwartz, I think he worked at the time for New York Magazine. He did a piece on what Trump was trying to do. Obviously, it was a hit piece. And the cover of the magazine had Donald Trump looking like this crazed bully going after these people's homes. It's the next thing that happened that Tony Schwartz will never forget. His phone rang. And of course, it was Donald Trump. And he steeled himself for what he figured would be some, outrage. And instead, Donald Trump said to him, I loved your piece. I loved it. I loved the cover. And he ended up it was one of the covers he framed and put up. And that's when Schwartz, he told him, Donald Trump loved being portrayed as a bully. He loved it. He wanted to be. That was the persona he wanted. Where most people would say, well, I don't want to look like a bully. I mean, that will make me, whatever. And the fact is that Schwartz saw right away, because Trump told him, this is a guy who sort of does everything backwards. And it works. It works for him. So anyway, if you want, I'm telling you, this guy, if you want to look that up on YouTube, it is mind-blowing, given when it was done, literally 2 months before Trump's elected, and how this Schwartz guy had, I mean, it is extraordinary. Really incredible. And then it's interesting because in the questions, people ask questions after, he was asked, can you come up with 5 adjectives or 5 characteristics of Trump that you consider positive? And the guy just sat there. And he said, wow. And he finally ferrets one out. He says, perseverance. He gets hold of something. He won't drop it. He'll never retreat. He just keeps on coming, keeps on coming, keeps on coming. Perseverance. And that was one. And then he thought some more and he said, he's very aggressive in sticking, and the guy who's the moderator says, I think that's the same thing you're saying again. So the fact is, he couldn't think of anything else positive to say about Donald Trump. That is how soulless and what an utterly empty human being he is. Okay, I got a bunch of emails here I guess I got to look at here. Barbara talks to her cats. Who doesn't? I have great conversations with my dog. Really. Okay, and I'm trying to get back to you guys. Here we go. And David says, here is a rant about civil war. Okay. I'll read your rant. Dave from Washington. People and groups that speak of civil war and actually start such things are always the minority group who feel their way of life and cultural philosophy is disintegrating, not because of active malfeasance against them, but because of the natural trajectory of modern justice, to paraphrase someone much more eloquent than I. The Southern states started our Civil War. They seceded from the United States, formed their own nation, and fired the first shots against the U.S. because it was inevitable that slavery could not exist in the modern world. Surprise that the Industrial Revolution and modern international world would not get a toehold in the U.S. until that archaic institution of slavery had been eliminated. And of course, the instigators of that Civil War lost. The same thing now. The wacko, fascist, Republican extremists want to take the country back because they know it's evolving beyond them and again, leaving them behind. It's always the aggrieved minority stuck in the past that craves armed conflict to regain what they're losing. In today's world, it's a straight, white, Christian, paternal society with clearly outlined minorities who know their places in society. With clearly outlined minorities. Anywhere from the back of the bus to in the closet or barefoot and pregnant and in the kitchen. They always lose their wars, but they cause a great deal of unnecessary damage in the meantime. I think I misread that one sentence of yours, and I'm sorry. But yeah, they're a straight white Christian paternal society with clear out spaces for where the rest of us belong. Anywhere from the back of the bus to in the closet or barefoot and pregnant. And Dave finishes off by saying, I loathe these bastards. Well, I do too. I'd pity them if they weren't so damn dangerous. I'd pity them, but they cause so much damage. God. So, oh, that's good. Yeah, cue the telephone. That's good. Okay. Now, since I mentioned Trump, and because since last we spoke, I didn't have an opportunity to do this. I have to say that since the affidavit that the judge decreed should be released, however redacted, since that's come out, wow, it has, the guy, I mean, you can't make up a crook like this. You can't make up a bad actor like this guy. I mean, I have lost track of how much judicial trouble he's got going. How many grand juries, prosecutors are after him on so many fronts. His private business, his tenure in the White House, his tenure out of the White House, acts he did before, after, during, and continuing. This guy is such a frigging crook. He doesn't even, and this Schwartz guy went on to say that lying for him is like the first, it's what he does. It doesn't even, he has no sense of it. He'll lie for any reason whatsoever. Anything. And then he believes them. And then he doubles down, never backs up. What's interesting is that he's doing some backing up with the Mar-a-Lago stuff. It's quite clear he's off his game. He's on his heels a bit, that he doesn't quite know how to respond, that his usual stuff ain't working. And you can tell that because he keeps throwing different reasons for why things were there, what they were there for, what happened. The story keeps changing literally in front of our eyes, which shows he can't find a story that works this time. And when you see the affidavit, or the little we do see of it, it is mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. This guy was the president of the United States, and he wants to be the president of the United States again. That ain't going to happen. Believe me, that is not going to happen. And Lindsey Graham can darkly threaten us that there'll be people, I can't remember his exact quote, but he literally said, if Trump is indicted, there will be, people will take to the streets. There'll be war. Well, then there'll be war. Because when you look at what he had there, he had stuff that was not just top secret. It was the kind of stuff that even if it were still where it was supposed to be, could only be handled, touched under the most extraordinary controlled conditions. It was stuff in which our human resources, that'd be spies, could potentially, yes, be found out, which would not only, of course, make them dead, but probably make us without the kind of information we need to stay secure in this extraordinary world. And one line that jumped out at me from all the reporting on it was the people around him. Because, I mean, the archives, everybody, people were begging him to give this stuff back. Give it back. The going to Mar-a-Lago with the FBI guys was the only thing they could do. They tried everything. They tried asking nicely, which is what they thought would work, because that's what always has worked. Then they actually threatened, hey, listen, we could subpoena this stuff. That didn't work. Nothing worked. He wasn't giving them back. And even his own advisors were saying, hey, I think you got to give this stuff back. And he said, these are the words, and you can just see him. They're mine, he said. They're mine. Now, there it is. It's a lie. They aren't his. They weren't his. They never were his. They belong to the government of the United States. It doesn't matter if the government is headed at the time by a Democrat or a Republican. It doesn't matter if you're a big honcho like a Secretary of State. They ain't yours. And it is illegal for you to have taken them and then refuse to give them back. But of course, the question is, why? Why did he take them? What has he done with some of this information? And what was he maybe planning to do with this information? Wow. Well, that's why the Espionage Act is one of the violations that appears to have happened here. So those of us who have always felt that Donald Trump was unbeknownst to him, essentially a Manchurian candidate, this then just adds, what was he going to do? My sense of Donald Trump is he has two things that seem to spur him. Just maybe there's more, but I can only think of two at the moment. And that would be money. So he'd sell them, get money. They're worth money. Governments would pay for this. Or two, vengeance. God knows we have seen how he is vengeful. And he could use, perhaps, this stuff to harm people he wants to harm. I don't know. But the guy is just an extraordinary crook. A crook of such breadth and depth that can you imagine the number of books that are going to be written trying to make future generations understand how such a horrible, lying sack of crap could ever have been President of the United States of America, taken over one of our two parties and put our entire nation at risk of death. And for those who continue to refute, again, the people who have swallowed the misinformation and disinformation whole, for those people to be somehow brought around, to be pulled back into a fact-based world, I don't know. I don't know if that's possible. And, the latest scam, I'm watching when he got kicked off Twitter, he was kicked off Twitter, right after January 6th? Because even Twitter then saw, oh my God, this guy is using us to foment revolution and a coup. So because he got knocked off of Twitter, he created, as I'm sure you know, his own Twitter-like website. It's called Truth. Of course it's called Truth. It's, oh God. It peddles lies. It is, of course, called Truth Social. It looks like it's going down. And it looks like a lot of money's going down the drain too. This is his latest. Now think about it this way. This is his latest business. He created this site. People had to back the site. In fact, a company called Digital World Acquisition, because they were a group that was going to take this and make it public and have it become a big, huge thing like Twitter. They're now saying that they believe they're going to the Securities and Exchange Commission and saying they need to be able to pull out of this deal because I'm not quite sure exactly what it is, but the company is warning that they're fearing that they could lose millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. Their stock prices plunged nearly 75%. And this company is thinking, obviously, that Trump's going down. And they don't want to be left holding the bag. But it appears they will be, because Trump has already screwed another group called Right Forge. That's a conservative web hosting service that has been helping him with Truth Social. He owes them more than $1 million. What do you think their odds of collecting that might be? Since we know Trump literally never pays anybody for anything. It appears that his company is going down. Now, Truth Social, though, is still up, and it has become one of those sites that crazy people inhabit. The guy who stormed the FBI office in Cincinnati, who was killed, he was a Truth Social poster and user. All of this has the New York Times has a piece today about QAnon is now all over this site. So all these QAnon boosting sites that have been thrown off all reputable media sites have now gravitated to Trump's site, because Trump's site is about lying all the time. Now, QAnon, as you know, is viewed by law enforcement as a domestic threat. It is linked to the Capitol riot. Capitol riot? Is that what it's being called? Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, they've all cracked down on QAnon accounts. So QAnon accounts have all gone over to Donald's site. You know who runs it? See how on top of things you are. Who is the CEO of this failing outfit? You remember? You know him. You know the name. Devin Nunes. Mm-hmm. Devin Nunes, who backed away from his congressional seat because he wasn't going to be able to retain it. And he's the chief executive of Truth Social. Yeah. So I started talking about disinformation. It's been on my mind, the danger it poses. And it's not getting any better in that regard. Hey, here's some good news, some recent polling. And I read this in City Paper today. By the way, City Paper's really been really upped its game. And I'm not saying that because I'm affiliated with them. I'm saying that because I used to do the show from down there, and now I'm sitting here at my dining room table. But I get them online, and because I'm a member, you can be a member, and man, the social, the digital stuff that they have coming is just wonderful. It's just better than it's ever been. I just wanted to say that. So one of the latest polls, Franklin and Marshall poll, shows both Josh Shapiro and John Fetterman with double-digit leads. They're just barely double-digit. Let's not get too excited. And Fetterman right now leads Oz 43% to 30%. I don't know what happened to all the other people. I guess they're still Oh, God, don't do this. No. I'm sorry. They just took my piece away. And Mastriano is trailing Shapiro. Shapiro has 44%. Mastriano has 33, 11 points. But both Fetterman and Shapiro, so far, among independent voters, people who identify themselves as independent voters, are way ahead. Shapiro leads among independent voters 40% to Mastriano's 24%. So all of that looks good. But I always get very nervous when polls show us in a good position, because that, and understandably so, can depress turnout. And speaking of turnout, it becomes quite clear that young people have been energized, especially young women, no surprise, by the Supreme Court Dobbs decision. And let me see, here's some just national numbers on this, what clearly is being seen as a surge in young people's registration since the decision. Okay, it says this year, prior to Dobbs, 23% of new registrants were under the age of 25. Since Dobbs, that has jumped to almost 30%. And that matches the same numbers that we saw in 2018, when younger voters drove a blue wave. And in fact, it's 5 points ahead of where it was in 2018. So all of that is stuff that is like making Republicans queasy and making Democrats feel like, well, geez, maybe we're not going to be slaughtered in November. But the reality is, the odds are still great that we're going to lose the House. We lose the House, there goes the January 6th commission. We lose the House. Can you imagine Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House, or even worse? Can you imagine, with the House's ability to do investigations, with the House's ability to impeach? They've already said they're going to impeach Joe Biden. Doesn't matter what for, they'll make something up. Because that's what they do. I'm going to do a personal complaint now. I feel like my show has suffered because I can't get my New York Times delivered, the physical copy. I mean, my MO has been for years to have the Times, to rip it to pieces, to highlight things. I mean, I used to do that with it, Wall Street Journal, the Post Gazette, USA Today. I had all these newspapers on my doorstep. Well, of course, they're all gone. But the Times kept coming. And I paid a mighty penny for that. I always thought I should be able to deduct it as a business expense. I should. $1,300 a year to get the Times delivered 7 days a week. They already got my money. You pay it in advance. Do you know how many times I've gotten the New York Times in the last 3 weeks? 4 times. Supposed to have gotten it 21 times. 4. And what you do when it doesn't come, you got to go online. You got to say, I'd like to report a problem with my delivery, blah, 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 blah. And it's become, this is what I do now. I look, the Times is not there. I have to go through this stuff. I've talked to people there. Oh, they're so nice. Well, here's what I did. I ended up, nothing has worked, nothing. And so I ended up writing, there's a place on their website that to say if you have a story idea, you can write them. And I thought, I'm gonna write them about a story idea, because you cannot get to anybody who really has any ability to explain why the hell they're not living up to their bargain. They got your money, which you gave them to get the Times every day, and it's not there. So they have this part on their website. We're eager to hear more from our readers. Do you have a story? Please fill out the form below. And then, right at the end, they say, if you are writing about an issue with your subscription, please visit this page. And I went to see what this page was. It's the page you're always being sent to, which gets you nowhere. So the fact that they had that in means I'm hardly the only person in the United States of America who has ever used this to say, what the fuck? But I tried. This is a total shot in the dark. What are the odds that I'll hear anything back? None. 0 to none. Right? Here's what I wrote them. My story idea is more a question that I'm sure I am not alone in wanting answered. Given the seismic changes print journalism has suffered in the last 15 years, few of them good for either journalism or democracy, why do newspapers continue the charade of even caring to have their product physically delivered? And then I said, I know you're rolling your eyes here, but please keep reading. I have suffered months of the New York Times so-called customer service, which apparently can do nothing to get my paper delivered, even though I live in a major metropolitan area. I pay $1,300 a year to have my paper not delivered. What's happened that makes this act seemingly now impossible? In the last 2 weeks, I've received the New York Times once. Once! I realized I should cancel my subscription and go all digital, which I suspect is what you want. But I'm a talk show host and have been for 40 years, and you're killing my routine of pawing through the paper every morning before my show, ripping out articles, highlighting major talking points, and then ranting at my audience with the assurance I have facts I need at my fingertips. My wonderfully ink-stained fingertips. I guess my question is, why offer a service you can't or don't even want to provide? It's disingenuous and unbefitting a paper that has a reputation for truth-telling. Tell the truth about why you can no longer hold up your end of the contract we've had for 30 plus years. Your customer service people have clearly been told to be rueful and kind and sympathetic. But that's not working. You know, there used to be a brilliant, handsome schizophrenic named Lansbury who roamed the downtown streets of Pittsburgh with a sandwich board that said, "The Postal Service won't deliver my mail." Once when I was in Washington for work, I was stunned to see Lansbury and his sandwich board in front of the White House. God bless him. I wish I had his sense of defiant hope that I could remedy my predicament. But I do not. This is my shot in the dark. And somehow I doubt if you've gotten this far. Yeah, well, that was that. Unbelievable. So now if I do a story, I have it digitally here in front of me, but I haven't it's hard. It's why sometimes there's dead air where I'm like furiously trolling or scrolling around and trying to, and it's making me nuts. But I can tell that, it's over. I know there's some people who are still getting their papers. What I want to know is, what do you think is happening when they know, they know they're supposed to give me a paper. So why would every 2 weeks all of a sudden one appear? That just doesn't, obviously I'm on the list that they're supposed to every day give a paper to. What happens that day when somebody finally gives me a paper? I don't even understand. And quite clearly, the Times contracts with some hapless bunch of nitwits and imbeciles here to deliver, I suppose, the Post-Gazette when it has a paper, and this, and I see the Wall Street Journal around. But obviously, it's a dying service. But then I want my fucking money back, I guess. I just can't quite make myself cancel. Hope springs eternal, but I'm about ready to throw in the towel. I just wanted you to know. And I do feel it's impacted the show. I do. Don't blame me. Blame it on the disingenuous New York Times. Okay? All right, guys, that's it. I'll be back tomorrow. I don't think Susan will be with us because she's traveling. And I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about. Okay. Have a good one.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.